Coming at number 10 now, we have childbirth. There's an evolutionary reason why childbirth is so painful and long for humans compared to every other mammal. We won't go into that here, but yeah, we all know it hurts. Obviously each individual experience is different, but the common comparison you grow up hearing is that it's kind of like pooping out a watermelon. To be more mature for a second, labour has been described as a tug of war, a twisting, pulling, squeezing battle that leaves a searing pain in the woman's back, and it lasts for hours. In fact, the average is meant to be about 14 hours, which is crazy. Alright, moving on to number 9 now, we have the bullet ant. The bullet ant is widely regarded to have the most powerful insect sting in the world. Some tribes in Brazil demand that boys place their hands into a glove filled with bullet ants as part of their initiation into adulthood. They get their name because, yes, the sting is supposed to feel like tiny bullets. The pain is instant and can continue for up to 12 hours or more. There is almost nothing you can do to stop your hand from shaking if you get bitten on it. Just wait it out, I guess, and remember to be more careful with them next time, or just avoid them altogether. Alright, at number 8 now guys, we have kidney stones. Kidney stones are hard deposits of minerals and salts that form inside the kidneys. But anyway, they really hurt. They can cause a severe fever and blood to appear in the victim's urine, and that's just when they're sitting there. Eventually, kidney stones have to leave the body, often through the urinary tract, and that hurts even more. The only silver lining I can think of is that most of the time they are quite small, but the current world record for a kidney stone that was removed was 6 inches wide. I feel a bit sick. Next up at number 7 now, we have Dercum's disease. This thing is just horrible, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Dercum's disease is a rare condition that involves big, fatty tumours appearing all over the body. The tumours are very painful. Even just sitting still and doing nothing, every inch of them is an agonising pain all the time. Perhaps one of the most scary things is that scientists don't really know what causes this, and there is no known cure. We know it mostly happens to middle-aged women, but that's about it. Okay, moving on to number 6 now, we have cluster headaches. These are the mother of all headaches, I guess you could say. Victims say that it hits them behind the eye, and then it's like a white hot poker being thrust into your eye socket and being held there for about an hour. Others say it's like a paper cut in the eye and in the center of their head. That imagery. Cluster headaches get their name because they come in clusters. They happen a few times a day for a while, and then there can be a break of weeks, months, or even years between them. You just don't know when they're going to hit next. They're even referred to sometimes as suicide headaches because of the suicidal thoughts they cause when people have a bad episode. The worst part is, again, scientists aren't 100% sure yet what actually causes them. Moving on to number 5 now, we have tooth abscesses. We all know how much a tooth pain can hurt. It's that kind of pain that you forget how bad it is until it happens again, and then you're like, oh yeah, this is hell. Well, a tooth abscess is said to be the worst of them all. As the tooth decays, bacteria enters it and the wound around it, causing infection and swelling. If it gets to the bones, it's game over. The infection can spread to other teeth or even to the whole jaw, causing excruciating pain, a fever, swelling, and just a general hatred of life. If you're not sure if you have an abscessed tooth, press the gum. If pus oozes out of it, then yeah, your tooth is abscessed. Stop watching this video and go and see a doctor right now. At the number 4 spot now guys, we have a torn Achilles. Your Achilles tendon is the largest of its kind in your body, running from your calf down to your heel. If it does rupture, you'll hear an actual popping noise, and then the pain will come. Many people say it's like taking a bullet to the leg. A muscle that important just shouldn't snap like that. It's not good. Unfortunately, it can be a fairly common occurrence among athletes. If it is bad enough, they may even require surgery to repair the damage. Coming at number 3 now, we have the post-puncture headache. The technical term for this is a puncture of your brain's dura mater. That's a thin membrane that surrounds your brain and spinal cord. The puncture can sometimes be caused by surgery or leaking spinal fluid in your body. Either way, the results are the same. It causes a headache to end all headaches. It's been described as like having a searing hot piece of metal spread all across your brain. Soon after one develops, sufferers experience nausea, vomiting, pain in their limbs, hearing loss, tinnitus, vertigo, and dizziness, to name but a few. Oh, and also moving makes it about 10 times worse. Just remember this guys, next time you have a normal headache, it's probably fine. Next up at number 2 now, we have crucifixion. A lot of you may know this one as the way the Romans killed Jesus Christ. For the Romans, crucifixion crucifixion was not just an execution method, it was a form of torture. It's specifically designed to keep the victim alive as long as possible. The condemned was normally nailed to a cross which left their full weight hanging from their arms. They would then be left outside for days and days without any food or water until they died, usually from exhaustion or asphyxiation. That's if the soldiers hadn't lethally wounded them with weapons before that. If you ever doubt how much crucifixion would actually hurt, just know that it's where we get the word excruciating from. Ugh.
I contemplate the moment in the garden, the idea of allowing your own crucifixion.
And finally, at number 1 now, we have lingqi. This is another form of torture that comes from medieval China. The name means death by 1,000 cuts. The condemned was tied to a wooden frame and then the flesh was cut from the body in multiple slices. The purpose was to cause as much pain as possible while still keeping the victim alive. It was also meant to be a brutal act of humiliation, and the events often drew big crowds. It was a punishment reserved for serious crimes such as treason, but perhaps the most shocking thing is that it only got banned in the last century. This was a perfectly legal form of punishment in China right up until 1905, and definitely the most painful I've ever heard of. Starting off at number 10 now, we have tetanus. This is a bacterial disease that affects the nervous system, leading to painful muscle contractions. Common symptoms include jaw lock and tightening of the neck muscles. It's said to be extremely painful. Even more serious is that the jaw locking can cause a person's breathing to suffer to the point where death is a real possibility. It's often caused by a puncture injury into the skin. Now, while there is no known cure for it, there is a vaccination for it. I've had it. I hope you guys have had it too. If you're old enough, I wouldn't want any of you to go through this kind of pain. At number 9 now, we have the breaking wheel. So we had a little bit of torture going on in our last video, and this one is no different. This form of capital punishment came from medieval times in Europe. It involved the condemned being lashed to a wheel and then their limbs were beaten until they broke. As you'd imagine, this was pain like no other. However, what made this so bad, I think, is just how long the pain lingered. After having their bodies broken, some of the condemned would survive for days afterwards, being kept alive in order to cause maximum pain. Alright, at the number 8 spot now, we have peritonitis. This is an inflammation of the tissue that lines the wall of your abdomen. This is caused by leakage of the intestines. That's obviously not something that's supposed to happen, and the result is excruciating pain. The pain is for good reason too. If left untreated, it almost always causes death. Bit of an interesting one up next at number 7 now, we have second-degree burns. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of third-degree burns, when a burn tears through all the layers of the skin and affects deeper tissues. It's obviously more serious in the medical sense than a second-degree burn, which only reaches the lower layer of the skin. However, some people argue a second-degree burn is more painful because the nerve endings don't get entirely destroyed, so you end up feeling the full lingering pain. They argue that at least with a third-degree burn, many of the nerve endings are destroyed to the point where the area just feels numb afterwards. Have any of you guys ever had second or third degree burns before? I would be interested to know if we had some personal stories to back this one up. Next up at number 6 now, we have psychological pain. This was something that a lot of you guys mentioned in the comment section of our last video, and yes, it obviously is very painful. Psychological pain may just be all in the head, but that's not to say it's not very real, and it can come in many different worrying forms. Ask anyone suffering from PTSD, depression, grief, or someone who's been a victim of psychological torture. They'll probably say that this is one of the most painful things they've ever had to go through. Moving on to number 5 now, we have gonadal torsion. As the name suggests, this is kind of a slang name for any torsion of the gonads, the male or female reproductive organs. In women, ovarian torsion involves an ovary rotating so much that it blocks a vein or an artery, restricting blood flow. The same goes with men's testicles in testicular torsion. Either way, the pain is said to be excruciating. I know that because one of my friends had testicular torsion once and likes to tell the story about it at least once a year. Sounds horrible. Next up at number 4 now, we have the stonefish sting. The stonefish is one of the most venomous fish on the entire planet. They are covered in needle-like spines which inject a dangerous neurotoxin into anything they feel threatened by. Unfortunately for humans, they're also very good at camouflaging themselves amongst underwater pebbles, hence the name stonefish. Now this means that every year, swimmers all over the Pacific step on them and end up in a lot of pain. As the toxin spreads, so does the pain, sometimes causing the entire foot and leg to swell up. Next up at number 3 now, we have complex regional pain syndrome. Sometimes after an injury that requires surgery, pain appears out of nowhere on the body with no obvious cause and not many ways to treat it. This is called complex regional pain syndrome. It just really hurts. Sometimes the pain may start in one limb and then spread to the whole body. Doctors have been desperately trying to find exactly what causes this and how to treat it, but the results have not been too hopeful. Perhaps that's the real scary thing about CRP. We can see the effects, but we don't know how to stop it. Alright, next up at number 2 now, we have Irukandji syndrome. This one is kinda terrifying. If you ever get stung by the Irukandji jellyfish, it's not going to hurt at first and will probably just feel like a little mosquito bite. Over the next half an hour though, the pain will slowly increase up to unimaginable levels. There will be severe headaches, muscle pains, nausea, vomiting and backaches that just keep getting worse. However, what makes this one quite unique is the feeling of impending doom that sufferers feel. Patients have reported being certain they are going to die and begging doctors to kill them. And finally, number 1 now, we have trigeminal neuralgia. Also known as Fothergill's disease, this disorder involves the inflammation of the trigeminal nerve that we all have inside of our heads. If this happens, one doctor describes the pain as exquisite. It's a sudden, shock-like pain on one side of the face that can last from a few seconds to a few minutes. It's said to be kind of like a knife just being stabbed into your skull. There have even been cases of people killing themselves because of the pain or just the fear of knowing when it will strike again next. Number 10 now, we have expanding bullets. Obviously, getting shot with a normal bullet is incredibly painful. Expanding bullets are next level though. They are designed to expand on impact to cause maximum damage. Sometimes they can expand to twice the size in diameter. They are mainly used for hunting animals because they apparently lead to a quick kill. However, if it doesn't work, it causes an insane amount of pain. They're so bad in fact that they are actually banned from being used in all wars under international law. At the number 9 spot now, we have a spinal tap. No, I'm not talking about one of the greatest movies ever made.
One louder.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I'm talking about a medical procedure. A spinal tap involves a doctor inserting a needle between 2 vertebrae in your spine in order to remove a sample of cerebrospinal fluid. Just to make that clear, that's needles in your spine sucking out fluid. I don't think any of us actually need to experience that to know why it's said to be very painful indeed. Moving on to number 8 now, we have gallstones. Gallstones are a hard deposit of digestive fluid that can form inside your gallbladder, a small organ just below your liver. These gallstones can be as small as a grain of sand, but sometimes they can reach the size of a golf ball, and that is a problem, a very painful problem. It may last for hours. Unlike kidney stones, these require surgery to remove. Next up at number 7 now, we have shingles. This viral infection is known as the adult version of chickenpox. It's caused by the same exact virus. After you recover from chickenpox, the virus then lies dormant in the nerve tissue near your spinal cord and brain. Then, after many years, it may reactivate as shingles. The result is a very painful condition involving a rash spreading across your body. This rash can end up blistering too, which only adds to the pain. Luckily, vaccinations do help, so make sure you have yours. Coming in at the number 6 spot now, we have pudendal neuralgia. This chronic painful condition affects both men and women and involves severe pain in the genitals or rectal area, 2 areas where you really don't want to feel a lot of pain. It's described as being a burning, knife-like stabbing pain. If that doesn't sound bad enough, sufferers also have trouble with peeing and sexual dysfunction. Pretty miserable sounding condition all around, I think. Next up at number 5, we have tooth abscesses. Some of you guys may have actually experienced this one. If a tooth breaks or decays, bacteria can get right in there and cause a serious infection known as an abscess. It hurts a lot. A constant, sharp throbbing pain that's so bad it sometimes stops people from sleeping. The infection can spread and cause the whole face to swell up. Look after your teeth, guys, and they will look after you. Coming in at the number 4 spot now, we have fibromyalgia. This one affects more women than men, but it can still happen to anyone. It's a widespread ache in the muscles all over the body. It usually begins after a physical trauma, a surgery, an infection, or significant psychological stress. The constant dull ache can last up to 3 months. To make matters worse, sufferers also report feeling fatigued, mood issues, and memory problems too. At the number 3 spot now, we have interstitial cystitis. This is the medical term for an inflamed bladder. Seeing as everything to do with peeing goes through the bladder at some point, it's not something you really want to have inflamed. It's very, very painful, but also comes with another worrying symptom. Sufferers almost constantly feel like they need to pee. If you have this, the signals to the brain are so mixed up that it reaches the point where people feel they need to pee up to 60 times a day, and all the while they are in a whole lot of pain. Next up at number 2 now, we have penile fracture. To put it simply, this is a broken penis. There is no bone there, so it's not a real break. It's caused by a blunt force, usually happens during sex. It happens when the penile tissue can't withstand a severe pressure and ruptures. The instant pain is accompanied by a distinct popping sound. That's the sound of the tissue tearing. It's a very rare but serious condition that requires surgery within 3 days in order to avoid future complications, shall we say. And finally, at number 1 now, we have animal attacks. Humans like to use weapons to hurt each other. Animals don't need that though. Some of them are just killing machines. Animals such as bears will slice, bite, and scratch a human to death if they get too close. The chances of death are pretty high, but death doesn't come quickly. Many attacks involve victims losing limbs and large parts of their skin. If you guys have ever seen what happens to Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant, you'll know exactly what I mean.